All right, folks. I'm going to try to put this on FluffTube. We're going to try to make it on YouTube with this, but I am with Jim Willy, editor of the newsletter of the website Golden-Jackass. Tons of information from this guy. I've had you on before. You've been on Nino's Corner.tv. We said we're going to behave a little bit for YouTube because I want people to really see this interview. And I plan to have you on for segments because you're such a great interview, and there's just so much going on that I mean, I don't even know where to begin. You sent me a list of notes, and the first part of it is the hidden past history of U.S. gold and silver lease in 1988 with China. You want to kick it off from there?
I'd be happy to kick it off there because this is a story. Pardon my voice. I'm dealing with some, how should I say, some modem radiation. It's not a sore throat. Yeah, there is a story to be told regarding the 1998 agreement for the independence of Hong Kong and its inclusion back, restitution, reinstatement, reunification with China. As part of that deal, the U.S. and England did not want to give it up. So they needed a bone, and the bone was a big silver and gold lease from China. They've got a lot of gold. They've got 5,000 years of cumulative gatherings of gold. Wow. By the way, the name China comes from Qin, which means king. So there are a lot of people in China named Chung, Cheng, Chuang, Sang, Qin. It all means variations of the word. Or you could just
bang a bunch of pots and pans together and get the same thing.
But my point, but Dave, they're all the children of the king. Okay. He had hundreds of wives. Okay. We made a deal for the Union of Hong Kong with China. We got a big bone of gold and silver. I estimate like 5,000 tons of gold and a lot more than that of silver. And we never paid them back. And back then, China was accumulating, they were newly reindustrialized and they were accumulating reserves and they were buying Fannie Mae bonds. So fast forward to 2005 and 6. Where I forecasted in the hat trick letter in its early years, it was only 2 years old. I said, we're going to have a mortgage bond problem and it's going to be centered in Fannie Mae. It's going to have a problem with Lehman Brothers because their CDS or credit default swap. It's an insurance policy on a bond default. It went way, way up. And China actually made good on a threat. They said, we're going to sell Fannie Mae bonds. And they did it in a kind of a left-handed way. They said, we're going to reduce our Forex reserves in the dollar, but we're not going to sell treasuries. Okay, therefore they're going to sell Fannie Mae bonds because that's all there is left. They triggered the Lehman crisis. In 2005 and 6, they sold hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Fannie Mae bonds. They caused stress within the system. It eventually erupted. And the whole crime scene
that leads to the 2008.
That's it. The Lehman event. And JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs suffocated Lehman, just like they bruised and killed Bear Stearns, because Bear Stearns was long gold and short the dollar.
So China's been a serious problem, a serious hindrance to America, although we're the ones that defaulted, right? We're the ones that
we reneged. We didn't pay them back their gold lease. And remember, back in 2014 and 15, this may be difficult for a lot to remember, but back then, JP Morgan's headquarters was taken over by the Chinese property conglomerate. And they took over the big private gold vault with a basement connection to the Federal Reserve gold vault. A lot of controversy because They did it for like 30% of the value of the JP Morgan complex. The Chinese bought JP Morgan's Manhattan complex.
Wow.
These are not commonly discussed concepts. And to me, they're all exciting because this is American history. And if you open up the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, you wouldn't read that China dumped hundreds of billions of Fannie Mae bonds. It's not there.
I never knew that. Yeah, this is news to me.
Well, these are just kind of the tidbits that are in the hat trick letter on a consistent basis. It's much deeper than that. There's something going on right now, Dave, that's really, really big, and it's attempts to repay 200-year-old gold bonds with China. And the United States, which I'm sorry to say, has never really honored a treaty in the last 150 years. We always say, well, we're making an exception because we're the exceptional nation. Broke all the treaties with the Native Americans, broke treaties with Europe, broke treaties with Russia. It's little known, but during the Revolutionary War, Russia played a role to hold back at times the British Navy. And it's little known that way back then, and even after the Revolutionary War and the Declaration of Independence and the start of our nation in the United States, China lent a lot of gold, and we gave them gold bonds, and they want their gold back. And that's part of this trade friction. It's never in the news.
No.
There's a tremendous amount of money right now going on, Dave, being passed from west to east. Just think from the United States to China. It's not just that, but that's the primary part of it. And it's restitution and payback for the 200-year-old gold bonds. And China's actually, they're really quite rough at the table. You might remember that 2 years ago, there was a big multi-billion-dollar deal where the Chinese got their hands access for Alaskan oil and mineral rights. Okay, these are all coming out slowly in drips, but it has to do with the debts from 200 years ago. We actually say in breaking the treaties and breaking the bonds, we say, well, golly, that's a 212-year-old bond.
Yeah.
And it's too old to redeem and honor. Well, it's never too old to honor a bond. I mean, what about an inheritance? Is that too old if it's written when the man is in his 20s and he dies in his 90s? Oh, I'm sorry, that's too old now. No, we don't honor agreements, and it's really quite pathetic.
Where does that with all that happening back then to where we're at now with the problems that we're having with China, Biden, the whole thing, how does that lead into now?
There's a lot of payback going on right now. There's a lot of restitution going on right now. And what I am coming to learn, and this is really quite exciting for me because I'll be honest, I only in 2017 and 18 did I pick up on cryptocurrencies. I learned about Bitcoin and smart contracts and the blockchain and tokens and a lot of different things, you know, peer-to-peer payments and a lot of I learned a lot. And then I kind of put it aside in 2019. What I'm learning now is that tens and hundreds of billions are being moved subterranean manner from west to east to pay back China for these bonds. And I think we've essentially said to China, we're not going to give you the gold, but we'll give you a lot of money. We'll move funds. We'll move hundreds of billions, but we're not going to give you gold. And you can buy your gold in Asia. You can buy your gold from the Australian mining. You can buy your gold from the Indians, you know, the nation of India. That's what's going on right now. It's
well, so how does it work with, hold on though, but how does it work with Trump saying that China owes us trillions for the, let's just say the attack that happened on us? Doesn't Trump refer to that and say, you know, China is going to owe us trillions of dollars for the attack, the I don't want to say it here on YouTube, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. The recent months attack with
Right.
lots of rules.
Is that a way to like, I mean, we're at war here.
We're trying. Okay. This is my interpretation. I remember that very clearly. And I thought at the moment, immediately, Trump is trying to neutralize the several $100 billion in gold bonds. And we're trying to say, well, look, you did this to us now, so we're not going to pay you back. We're going to just tear up the bond. That is part of what's going on. But there's something that's a hint, Dave, a big, big hint. We're seeing many, many billions in Bitcoin transactions, and it can't be justified with normal times. I believe we're seeing, according to my source, I've got a source on the Pacific Rim, and he reemerged a month ago after being a client several years ago. He reemerged and said, Jim, I got to fill you in on what's going on. There's multi-billion-dollar restitution going on. It's going from the United States to China. It's going from west to east, and they're using crypto. And they're trying to avoid the big elite US bankers because they tend to freeze the funds, take a large portion of the funds, or take a percentage, like a small percentage of the fund, or steal it all. That's what's being avoided, and it's avoided by means of crypto and token movements, the crypto tokens, not just Bitcoin. Okay, my colleague, he's my friend too, Rob Kirby. He believes that a lot of trade is being made final by means of Bitcoin. And I'm pointing out that there's a lot going on with that, and there's even more going on of west to east restitution. It's bond settlement, bond satisfaction, but, and this is harder for a lot of people to swallow, but I remember when I was a kid, learning about the 19th century railroad construction out west using slave Chinese labor.
Right. Yeah, that was also through here in El Paso. They have a Chinese cemetery here.
Wow. Okay. Well, what shocked me a month ago in a conversation with this Pacific Rim fellow, who's turning out to be a very valuable source of information, he said in the 1950s and 60s, the build out of the United States infrastructure and commercial buildings also used slave Chinese labor. Okay, there's restitution going on. And he said it's in the small trillions, not like 20 trillion, more like 1, 2, 3 trillion. And they're doing it with cryptos, Bitcoin, and the tokens, especially the tokens. They would create, go ahead.
Where does the Three Gorges Dam fit into all this?
Oh boy. It's a three-part deal. There are 3 chapters to this. I've looked into this, and I've got some Chinese clients, and the Chinese clients, by the way, filled me in on what happened in Wuhan, which you could read about it if you sign up for my newsletter. First of all, it's one of the biggest dams in the world. It might be the biggest dam in the world. If you look at a picture, you see about 3 or 4 facades for the dam, which means it's 3 times bigger than the Hoover Dam outside Las Vegas, maybe 4 or 5 times bigger than that one. I've seen that in person. They've got tremendous amount of electricity generation from that dam, natural hydro. It powers several different Bitcoin mining functions, mining centers. That has been disrupted. I am told, although we're not seeing any stories or pictures that the Three Gorges Dam has been broken, or it's not operating, or it's flooding, it's because it's very tight security on that story. The Chinese press will not release that story, but I'm pretty confident that it has been shut down and broken, and that there are floods. They're not massive floods, but they're floods downstream. Okay, the Bitcoin factory is one thing, Dave. The second thing is that there's trafficking of, let's just say, little units. And that is a center. Okay, that location is a center. The third thing is having to do with farmland. It is commonly reported that downstream from the Three Gorges Dam, there is farmland that feeds 300 million Chinese. And I am told that a portion of that, maybe a large portion of that, has been flooded and ruined.
Mm.
So China's in trouble, and that's why they're collecting their, oh my gosh, if you took the corn, they've got over 60%.
So the Three Gorges Dam is now they're in serious trouble because of that. And
Yeah.
that's why we're seeing everything play out the way it is.
I think that's why they're gathering supply and causing our supply shortage.
And buying up our farmland.
That's been going on for some time, but yeah, it continues. I just had a chart that I put into my January report. It's going to be published very soon, a few days. It has to do with the grain, the percentage of grain reserves that China controls. It's 70% of corn. I mean, these are outrageous figures, and we're going to see shortages here because one very big factor going on with the Biden show, if I can say this, is that not just oil and gas reserves are being directed to China, but grain reserves are being directed to China.
Wow.
Okay, now
Wow.
we've got the west to east restitution, but they're also cashing in. They still have $1 trillion, $1,000 billion of treasury bonds. They're cashing them in and saying, we want oil.
And they're going to blame this on the pandemic. That's what they're doing. They're using the pandemic as an excuse for everything, for the cargo ships to be kept out at sea. But really, this is what's the real backstory is what you're saying right now.
I think so, yeah. And California is a much more complex story with the ports. The California, how should I say, Environmental Protection Group, or whatever the name is in California, they're saying that no truck built before 2015 can enter the port in order to be loaded. So they've got a massive short. I'm told that that's over 80% of the trucks.
Wow.
On the road. So they're making up rules to make the supply chain even tighter. You got other rules.
Engineered.
Yeah,
completely engineered.
Sabotage.
Sabotage.
I mean, you got other Biden show executive orders and rules that indicate that if someone is scared of contracting the sickness, they can resign from their job and still collect unemployment. And it's okay. So it's harming the supply chain. I don't want to get into the virus topic, but let me just say that the COVID justification is being used for multi-trillion-dollar banker bills, bank aid. And I've got a story that's just, it'll rip you up. If you don't laugh, you'll cry. But in August, September, and October of 2019, the repo market blew up. That's the repurchase market. That's where the big banks would say, hey, we're really short on a couple billion for the next 2 days, but we got some treasury bonds. We're going to go in reverse, the repo, repurchase, go back to the Fed window, and we want cash for our bonds. We're not going to buy bonds. We're going to do the opposite. And that blew up the repo market. Now, I'm sure the evidence was the blown up repo market, which to me indicated that the king dollar was at death's door. I actually said in my reports for August and September and October of 19, we're going to see some fantastic events that will probably lead to a new form of the dollar. But instead, what we got was the arrival of the medical doctors to take over. They did a jump shift. Are you familiar with bridge? The terms of the four-person card game of bridge. They did a jump shift and switched suits from banker to doctor. We did not get the new dollar because we're not ready for it. And this is what I'd like to talk about in the remainder of the time.
Go ahead.
The dollar is in its sunset. Okay, they switched to the medical suit. I mean, like a suit in cards. like poker,
Right,
bridge.
right. I get it.
I played some bridge. I wasn't really good at
I
it.
don't think I've ever played bridge, so I don't.
You probably played
I thought
poker,
that's like
though.
what old people do in an old folks home. I don't know. Whatever.
Well, my mother and father were part of a bridge group with the universities. My dad was a literature professor. There was always a bridge club going on, but my mother loved it. I was good at poker. I like strip poker a little bit more. Okay, something big happened in late 2019. A decision was made. I think the white hats, let's just call them the white hats and the black hats, okay?
Yeah.
I hate white and black being good and bad because I got black friends and they're wonderful people. I got a few, not a lot, I got a few. A big decision was made. Neither side was ready for the transition from the dollar. So the white hats allowed this to happen because they were busy building the bridge to the digital dollar.
Mm.
The bad guys thought we can install the new world order, and let's just leave it at that. With
The Great Reset.
The Great Reset, New World Order, with the cover of a medical emergency. Let's just leave it at that.
Right, right.
Okay. Now, the white hats, the good guys thought, all right, we're going to get really busy and we're going to decide on XRP from Ripple Labs. We're going to have that the blessed entity vehicle. I call it the bridge. I mean, it may be a vehicle for settling payments from one country to another with trade. And it might be the vehicle for, say, large SWIFT transfers. But it's also the bridge from old dollar to new dollar. So think of it as the XRP road will use the XRP cars. And it's going to be about an 18 to 24 month transition. We're not ready for the digital dollar. And last time I was on your show, I mentioned the $27 trillion debt, the annual $2.5 trillion deficit, which is about more than half of the whole budget. We've got COVID stimulus bills. I just read that in late 2019, that same period when the repo market blew up, Goldman Sachs, Nomura, which is a Japanese firm, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan and Nomura received $8 trillion in loans, close to 0%. It'll never be paid back. Essentially a gift. Okay, what happened? I say the king dollar died. And it needed 8 trillion to sustain a few more months while we got to the COVID relief packages, which are over 2 trillion. Okay, the XRP is going to be the main vehicle, the main deal from getting to the old paper dollar, the fiat dollar, the Forex dollar. And when I say dollar, I mean all of them. The pound, the yen, the euro, all of them are going to be moving toward a digital currency system. And it's not ready yet. And we saw some very unusual events like Reggie Middleton being captured, prosecuted without crime. They didn't charge a single crime against Reggie Middleton. He walked away with all of his intellectual property. He's going to move it largely into his DFI crypto coin, digital asset coin, token. I prefer token to coin. And there was another frivolous lawsuit of Ripple Labs by the US government. It's, David, just to slow them down.
They're just kicking the can down the road. They're just slowing the pace. Because the banksters are not ready. And I'm going to make a bold comment, and it's just in my own vernacular. The banksters are good at fraud and murder. They're not good at software engineering. Yeah. Okay. There are lots of precedents, like Neil Keenan was murdered and replaced. He was all about the old bonds, the gold-backed bonds.
They murder people left and right. They actually murdered somebody, a source of mine. They murdered a close friend of his in Europe, and it really shook up my friend. The banksters sued XRP and Ripple Labs in order to buy time, not so much to hold them back as to, well, it's two motives. One, to hold back the development of the Ripple Labs, but it didn't work because they're still working. And the other motive is to buy time in order for the banksters to develop something in a similar manner with the intellectual property so that they can match Ripple and say, we've got our own Ripple. We don't need your Ripple, but they failed. And now they're saying, we need your Ripple. We're going to make a deal with you. We're going to have a timetable. We're going to have a schedule. It's going to be 18 to 24 months. We've got a span of time, and it is our accord. It's proof that the banksters failed in developing a similar system to XRP, and the same thing happened with Reggie Middleton. They failed in developing the building blocks for the digital financial structures that include banks and bond markets and stock market. It's the whole works.
So in a sense, their fate is sealed.
Their fate is sealed, and they bought in to the digital system devised by the Bitcoin, devised by Reggie Middleton as Veritasium, and devised by the Ripple Labs with XRP. Ripple is going to become a household word. Their coin, their token, XRP is probably going to make a move 15-fold in the next 2 years. It's a great investment. And I look forward to seeing what Reggie Middleton does. I'll make a comparison. When I was early in my career, 1980s and 90s, I noticed that Microsoft did not really deserve their position as icon. They bought DOS, they bought CPM, and they created a monopoly. They committed date rape with Ashton tape for a database system. Date rape in 12 different examples. They use the same model. Oh no, this is an application software engineer. No, it's not. It was a systems operating system engineer. They changed labels, changed business. Okay, back then, Bill Gates became an icon, became a billionaire. I think Reggie Middleton is going to become the antithesis of a good icon billionaire. You watch to see in 5 years, he's going to own banks with lending on an honest basis. He's going to be a white hat hero. He's going to be, it's going to be exciting.
So let me ask you this, where I'm a little confused. So China has their hands in Bitcoin, right? No, do they have their hands in Ripple or like XRP?
I think Ripple is widely owned.
Okay.
XRP is widely owned. This is going to be a full participation, multilateral project to get most of the planet for their financial. Just think of trade and transfers, SWIFT and trade. You got to make the payments. You got to have everything made complete. If you do that, you need everybody on board. You need you need much more than just a basic critical mass. Critical mass is 70%. I think XRP is going to get more than that critical mass. I've been saying for 3 or 4 years that we're going to have a new system. It must have critical mass in order to get to the other side. If you don't have critical mass, let's just make up something silly. You got 3 or 4 countries and they've got a gold-backed great system, and they're just really small. They're like 20% or 18% of the global trade. Then they're going to happen, but they're going to be victims of their own success because of the lack of critical mass. Because they're gold-backed, their currency is going to go up 500%, and they're going to ruin their export trade because they're not critical mass. You need to get the majority on board so there's no other side that's the majority, so that you're not the minority. And that's what I think Ripple is going to achieve. And it looks like some conferences have taken place where just that has been agreed upon. We got a timetable. We know we're going to do this. It's an event schedule with a rough marking of dates on the calendar. And from what I'm hearing, we're likely to see a big move. It could be like 15-fold the next couple of years. I'm speaking in rough terms, but I'm more precise in my January newsletter, which I'm having a hard time finishing because it's just too interesting, and I'm getting distracted by phone calls. And I love the interviews. Don't get me wrong. I love the interview. They're critical. I have a difficult February and March coming up, and I'd like to survive.
So when you said something about the 18 to 24 months, was it?
Yeah, for Ripple. It's to get
Are
from
we
the
in
old
that
dollar.
time period right now?
Yes.
Or has that started yet? Or
think-
are we in it?
I think we're in it. I think it has started. I think we're in the first month. If not the first month, then we're looking at the beginning of the first month, like imminently. It could be the second month, but I don't think so. What we're trying to get from and to is the current Forex system, which is paper-based. We call it fiat paper currency system. It's fiat, meaning a declaration of value. A fiat order is a declaration of an order, not the car. I actually just learned what fiat stands for in Italy as a car.
What does it stand for? You got to let me know.
I can't remember.
Not important. Fuck it.
FIAT. The T is Torino. The A is automobile. The I is Italian. And I can't remember what the F is for. It's okay. What we're trying to get from and to is the current dollar paper-based system without a gold backing to a digital structure with a gold backing. There's an old saying that when you discard or abandon a metal-backed system, you go to paper. And when it fails, you cannot go to another paper system. You must go to a metal system to gain the confidence after what I call now our Weimar experience. We're in the middle of American Weimar. We don't have the wheelbarrows to buy a loaf of bread, but we do have rather outrageous near 20% price inflation, and the service sector has recently caught up to that. We're in scary times.
No, yeah, we are. And what about all these rumors of Nasara Jassara? Do you have any input on that stuff? Like, what is Nasara Jassara? People ask me all the time. I don't know much about crypto, Nasara Jassara, the quantum financial switch we're going to make. Do you have any input on that?
I believe the Jassara, which is global economic structural reform, something like that. The Jassara is centered on the quantum financial system and XRP.
So XRP is huge in all this.
Yes, XRP is going to be, I think, the big bus that enables the Jassara trip and takes us from the old dollar to the new dollar, takes us from the paper system to the gold back system, takes us from the current nebulous, fraud-ridden, debt-ridden system to the digital system on the other side that might be glorious. Let me point out something that's a little tough to swallow. I constantly seek out information. How much has the alliance, that's the pro-Trump, the pro-liberty, the patriot side, it's not the fascist side, it's not the Biden side. That's all very temporary. It's an anomaly. The alliance, the best element of the US military, how much have they seized in assets? And I'm hearing it's like 20 to maybe as much as 40 trillion.
Wow. The good guys, the white hats, the white hats.
The good guys, the white hats. And I'm not talking about gold. I said assets. Now, I mean assets meaning non-bullion type assets. And where does that come from? Well, let me just make up a couple things. Let's just imagine that the Bush crime scene, the Bush crime family, has been totally taken over. Well, I know from pretty good source back in 2016 from an American, a friend of mine, former NSA, former Langley, former U.S. Army Ranger assassin. He's a kind of scary guy. He said that the Bush family owned approximately $5 trillion in assets.
Wow.
Okay. If the Bushes have been knocked out of action, then that might have been confiscated and seized using the Omnibus Act, which is the global equivalent of RICO in the United States. Okay, that's just one. Here's another one. Let's say that the Vanderbilt family has been caught with crimes having to do with little guys, and their 200 billion got confiscated. Where's it go? It goes into this fund. And we might see a day, Dave, this is really wild. We might see a day where the 27 trillion is paid off by the elite asset seizures. And then we have no debt. Now, let's move to gold. I've got it on very good authority that Fort Knox has been recovered. That was 8,500 tons. It was not a big sum. At one time, a few years ago, many years ago, it was worth, just for rough napkin figures, it was worth $500 billion, $500 billion. Not a huge amount in the scheme of things, not a huge amount, really. I mean, Italy had about 3,000 tons.
I was going to ask you,
4,
what about the Vatican and what about the royal family? Has their assets been taken?
Yeah, I think so. I think the British royals have been seized. I think the Dutch royals have been seized. I think the Belgian royals have been seized. And most of the European royals have been caught with blood on their hands and their assets seized. The Vatican is a much different story. I don't want to get into all the different aspects of what I've heard, but I will say this. Charlie Ward, which has been confirmed by others on my end, not having to do with Charlie Ward, have confirmed that there were about 700 flights, and each one, I checked the limit on the Hercules, and it's like 30 tons, 40 tons. Okay, we're talking about a couple thousand tons. And it apparently, according to reports, came from the Vatican vaults.
Wow.
Okay, now that is a drop in the bucket. There might have been 2,000 or 20, it could be 20,000 tons. I have trouble sometimes with zeros. If there were 700 flights and each one could hold 30 tons, that's 3 zeros on a 20, that's 20,000 tons. There could be, okay, that's how I do it. You know, just how many zeros? Let's multiply the main numbers, 21 with 3 zeros. Okay, I'm told that there are hundreds, maybe thousands times more gold at the Vatican. I'm told there's a tunnel that goes by way of Turkey, goes all the way to Jerusalem, and it's lined with gold for 1,000 miles. Okay, these are wild stories that, you know, maybe we'll have them confirmed in time, but I focus on how much gold does the Alliance and the U.S. military good guys, how much do they have? And I'm hearing 200,000 tons.
Wow, that's enormous. Is that why the deep state right now is panicking and pushing forward with taxing and this and that, trying to fund them because they're broke? They're
broke. They've had their assets seized. They're broke.
Does this go with the also the executive order that Trump put in place in 2018, September of 2018, about any foreign interference of the election, assets will be seized?
It's all part of the same. It's not just omnibus, but it's foreign intervention, foreign interference, asset seizures. Wow. And that goes back to the original comment you made that Trump is saying China owes us a lot of money. But what he's really saying is we're going to capture Chinese assets. I've been told that, and this is widely known, a third of urban U.S. commercial property. Like, I don't know where you're living, Texas, El Paso, or where?
Texas, yeah.
Okay, Texas. Okay.
Might as well just say it's Mexico.
Okay. Well, fine. Okay, let's just say Dallas. Dallas has a third of their office buildings owned by Chinese. Chicago has a third of their office buildings owned by Chinese. LA, ditto. Detroit, ditto. Denver, ditto. San Francisco, ditto. Seattle, ditto. Vancouver, ditto. Okay, these assets are vulnerable for the foreign interference application of the law for resolution. These are very exciting times. Now, back to the dollar and its backing. I keep saying, unless we do something about the debt, whether we renege on it and have like bond haircuts, you got some treasury bonds, well, fine, you're going to get 65 cents on the dollar for it. It could be that it'll be a better deal than that if these seized assets are used to offset the debt, to pay for the debt. And then you're left with a new question. You want a new system, a new dollar, a new digital dollar on the other side of that Ripple XRP bridge? How are you going to do that? Well, you've got 200,000 tons of gold.
Wow.
So you got enough for a new dollar backing. They're calling it the treasury dollar. Right now, the bad guys, the banksters, I call them, the globalist cabal, the banksters, they're panicking. There's a lot of rumors that they're going to try to steal private bank accounts like yours.
Yeah.
And I've got a motto. I don't know if you've heard this before. It's kind of a false flag corollary. If you hear about it in advance, ain't going to happen. How many false flags have we been told that might happen and didn't happen? It's because of the false flag corollary. You got early warning, not going to happen. Okay, I heard early warning that La Palma off the Moroccan coast of northern Africa was going to fall into the sea and cause 100-meter tsunamis on the U.S. Florida and East Coast, but we got adequate warning. It wasn't so much a false flag as it was a cabal harp weapon directed at La Palma to try to break it. And eventually the White Hats invaded the Norwegian location and neutralized them. In other words, killed a lot of people. Didn't happen.
Where does Russia fit into all this? That may be a pretty loaded question.
Well, what I like when I get a tough, broad question, I try to make it more specific. Where does Russia?
Because they're making a big threat out of Russia right now. The deep state is, at least.
Let's focus on Russia vis-a-vis Ukraine. Okay, I got pretty good information over a month ago that in Ukraine, it's the U.S. good guys allied with the NATO, the European good guys, fighting the Rothschild mercenaries and not fighting Russia. Russia was on the border watching, awaiting, and helping the Americans with logistics and intelligence. We're not fighting Russia. Russia's on the other side. Who's telling you that Russia is a threat and might be an enemy combatant in a war?
The White House. The White House is. They're the only ones.
Right. It's the captured MSM press and the bullshit artists. Okay. Something important happened 2 or 3, 4 weeks ago. And it was, I was saying before, Dave, that Geneva and Ukraine are the last battlegrounds. And it looked like the bad guys and the Rothschild mercenaries were driven out of Ukraine and they were driven into Kazakhstan and they lost.
Is that why Kazakhstan overthrew the government?
Yeah. And they seized the Ukrainian leaders' assets. We are now in cleanup mode in Ukraine. And who did the defeat? Who caused the defeat of the Khazarian mafia, the Kabbalists, the bad guy Rothschild mercenaries? It was the Russian army in league with the Soviet former republics. They're forming a new, it's kind of a NATO for the Soviets now. They've got, it's the stands, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan. They all joined and produced soldiers and beat the mercenaries. And the Russians came out with a comment afterwards saying, none of these mercenaries spoke Russian or any Slavic language. Mercenaries. Yeah. They were defeated. Okay, so we're getting now toward the final pass of the cleanup. And it's exciting, but it's also dangerous because you know what happens with a wounded bear who's in a corner.
Well, it's like it's like the fight game. When you got someone hurt, that's when they're the most dangerous. That's when they start throwing haymakers and they literally start fighting for their life. And that's what we're going to see now.
We're going to see it. And it's gotten weird because some of the major players on the evil side are using doubles and avatars. Now, you probably watched the movie 10 years ago, Avatar.
I remember that.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But remember, the guy entered like a little capsule.
Right.
And something.
Yeah, it's like the Matrix almost.
Yeah, but it grabbed his mental processes so that he could have control mechanism for the body out there. That is what's going on. What we need to see now is a device to prove that someone is an avatar and not a human, and to prove that he's under control by knocking out the frequency of control mechanism. We are in some very
kind of like Biden,
time.
maybe Biden.
Well,
is that a far fetch? I mean, everyone looks at him and goes, "That motherfucker ain't real."
He's got about 5 doubles. We talked about this a little last time. He's got a few doubles. He might have an avatar. I believe Nancy Pelosi might have an avatar.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think they're more, okay, this could sound weird, but I think Fauci might be an avatar. And I've got his left and right, his double. His double is very good, but not perfect. He's got a double. I think he's got an avatar. These are defiant people. Here's another avatar, that Jen Penske, the White House.
Raggedy Ann.
Well, yeah, maybe it's Zuckerberg's sister, but you know, this is weird stuff. But
yeah.
Could it be that Zuckerberg, on those occasions, is directing that body as an avatar?
I mean, nothing surprises me anymore. We are living in what I thought was sci-fi, no longer. I mean, I don't claim to know, but I love talking about it.
I'll tell you, we're seeing a good guy, artificial intelligence, computer group of systems fighting against a bad guy, cabal, fascist, banker, medical fascists, and their AI, their artificial intelligence. And what it does is it makes an event schedule. What do you do? Okay. Oh, and a big event happened. The Kazakhstan event happened. Ukraine happened. That's a new element for the simulations in the AI war. And now, okay, we're going to examine 12 different scenarios. Which one looks good? And we're getting very close to the emergency broadcast. Very close. I think it's going to be after a captured CNN. They're down 90% in their viewing audience. That means close to 90% of ad revenue.
Well, what do you think is going to happen with this this NASA bill they just passed, where they gutted it and put in the basically the right to cheat election? I guess it's heading to the Senate now. But what do you think about that? I mean, they're making very desperate moves here, and I said earlier in my program that they're going to start using force, desperate force, censorship, deplatforming people once again. What's your thoughts on that? On this? I mean, what do you think is going to happen with this election reform bill, whatever it is, moving into the midterms? Do you think something's obviously going to happen before then, right? Some kind of intervention?
I think that a lot of these bills are going to be nullified after the cleanup.
That's what I was told.
They're not lawful. They'll be very easily swept aside. Look at the corporate mandates, for instance. Upon the initial challenge, the bad guys back off. The corporate monkeys, I call them, minions. I think we're going to see, and this has already been shown, it's between 30 and 35 different state legislatures. They've turned red. They've done election reform. They're not going to permit the mail-in ballots, all that nonsense. Not going to happen. So we're going to see a sweep in November 22 that worries the hell out of the bad guys. Now, as for election reform at a federal level, I think it's going to go nowhere. It's all going to be happening at the state level.
Okay.
It's up to 35 different states now. And you know, I used to think, well, one of these battleground states like Arizona or Georgia is going to turn red, and the rest will turn. it doesn't look like that's happening. And we've had plenty of time for that to happen. I believe that the attorneys general, the AGs are just not going to do it because they're having their lives threatened. And my standard line is, well, the attorney general in Arizona is not going to do it because he's got a little 7-year-old girl and she's at risk.
Yeah.
They're not going to do it.
Right.
So they're going to wait for November 22. It's not that far away. The campaigns are going to heat up in about 7 months.
Right.
And I think the Republicans, the Reds, they're going to sweep.
I agree with you. As long as it's fair.
As long as it's fair. And you know, here's where down the road, some things might become a lot more fair and a lot more interesting, is the blockchain might eventually serve as the database structure for election returns and votes, so that you, Dave, can say, I voted in Dallas. I voted on November 3rd. And here's my vote. You can see it a month later. It didn't flip. And you can't do that now. The data is murky. They got the Dominion flipping, and we don't want to get into all that fraud stuff, but it's just loaded with potential for hanky-panky.
Right.
And that's going to go away. We might say in 3 years, 2 years, that it's all in the blockchain. Not just bond market trades, bond market investment, but say elections. Okay, this is very exciting. We want contracts, and a bond purchase is a contract. You sign, you buy, you get a certificate. That's a bond ownership. It's a contract. Okay, you get something for that. Okay, that's going to be on the blockchain. The bad guys, the banker cabal, they don't want the blockchain. And I just learned this. There are several blockchains. There are going to be many different highways, and there are going to be some primary highways. It's going to be a very exciting time, and I'm catching up. I'm learning a lot. I've got what I consider now to be an ad hoc XRP team of 5, and they're all good. They're all solid. And you know, the funny part, they're all saying the same thing, and they don't know each other.
That's why I love talking to you, man. You have your fingers on the pulse, man. You're now like one of my favorite guests. So, Jim, Willy, thank you for joining me.
Help me to get through February and March, because of an obstruction with my payment processor last summer. I've got a problem in February and March. I need a lot of new clients and support. So
you have a donation button on your site or anything?
Yeah, that's not as effective as a consult or a new subscription order.
So people can go to golden-jackass.com.
And in the center is a yellow subscribe button. Subscribe to the newsletter. Last time I was on with you, we had a nice little flow. It was
that was on my Nino's Corner.tv. So that's good. I'm going to put this on FluffTube. So this is going on YouTube. Hopefully you get a much bigger response. You will.
I hope so.
I'm going to keep having you on, Jim Willy. I love having you on.
Well, so, we can pick a theme, because I've got I got a whole page of themes here. We only touched on 2 or 3, but
no, let's keep this for segments, and we'll jump into different segments, and I can have you as a recurring guest.
There's the reval of various smaller country currencies after they've had nation building. In other words, destruction. You've got Goldman Sachs with options trading off the chart. You got BlackRock. You've got a lot of things going on, and I tell you, it's exciting, but it's also scary.
Oh, it's very scary.
We've got to have a good outcome. We've got to have a good outcome for humanity and our species. We must preserve our species. So people need to just say no.
I agree. Jim, thank you so much. I'm going to put this on FluffTube tonight, and I'll keep in touch with you, and let's schedule another broadcast another interview in about 2 weeks.
That'd be great. Much appreciated.
God bless you, Jim Willy.
All right. Thank you. God bless you.